Hello, everybody, and welcome to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast. I am Pete Chianca, here as always with Dave London. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Pete.
It is our December episode. That means the holiday season is upon us. I think Hanukkah is late this year, if I'm not mistaken.
You're asking me because I'm Jewish, aren't you?
Well, I'm half Jewish, so I only half know.
Okay. Well, I
I
don't
have a
know at
vague
all, so I'm not
idea.
sure. Not sure what that means. Um,
Yeah, I
Hanukkah
think
is
I think it might
it's
be
it's
after
8 days
Christmas.
this year. I know that it is 8 days
Yes,
this year.
they're doing the 8, sticking with the 8. Hey, if it
Sticking with the
works.
eight.
What are you
So,
going to do? So we're
all
very
right.
excited. We're have a great guest today, so we're going to try to get to that, very quickly. Although we did want to mention for the people in the Boston area a very big event that's coming up in actually we're from about a week from when we're speaking right now. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. December 7th and 8th, 2024, the Massachusetts Independent Comics Expo, one of the great independent comic book fairs in the country, happens right here in Massachusetts. This year it's going to be Saturday and Sunday, as I said, the 7th to 8th, starting at 11 a.m. at the Fuller Building at Boston University. So for the website, it's micexpo.org, and that will have all the information. We've presented there on occasion. We're not presenting there this year, but it's certainly a well worthwhile event. Keith Knight will be there this year with a lot of other fantastic artists and independent comic book publishers and producers.
Yeah, it has a feel that's it's sort of a cool indie feel to it, as
Mhm.
opposed to some of these corporate comic book shows.
And it's free. It's free to enter, so that's a big plus.
Oh, maybe we should go.
Maybe.
Well, so please mark your calendars if you have any interest at all in independent comics, comic strips, comic books, and it's in a cool location. And if you like and are in and around Boston, it's a great way to spend a day or two over that weekend. And without further ado, then we are going to get to our guest, the one and only Jeff Kinney. He is the man behind Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Have you heard of it, Dave?
It rings a bell. It's that's like asking me if I knew the guy who played Jerry on Seinfeld. It's,
Yeah,
that's a
basically.
Gary Goldman bit, by the way, not mine. So
Yeah, we'll take it. We'll take it. Don't ask us how we got him, but we did. And he actually, typically we record these introductions prior to the interview. In this case, due to scheduling, we are recording it after. So we can say without any doubt whatsoever that it's a fantastic interview because to us, it's already happened. But you lucky people get to hear it for the first time.
we're sort of in the future. We're coming to you from the future.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I was gonna wear my one piece silver jumpsuit.
Right. Yeah, just the Marty McFly outfit. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So everybody, please stay tuned. Within 30 seconds time, we will be back with the one and only Jeff Kinney of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast with me, Pete Chianca, and my co-host, Dave London. We are super excited. We often say our next guest needs no introduction, but this time he really does need no introduction, but I will introduce him. Jeff Kinney is the creator and writer of a little series you may have heard of called Diary of a Wimpy Kid. The first Wimpy Kid book was published in 2007 and became an instant bestseller. And now, several dozen books later, there are more than 290 million copies of the series in print worldwide. Jeff is also the creator of Pop Tropica, which was named one of Time's 50 best websites, and with his wife Julie, owns a very cool bookstore in Plainville, Massachusetts called An Unlikely Story. Jeff Kinney, welcome to Strip Search.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, we really can't thank you enough for being here. And we wanted to start off just since you are in the middle of it. I think in the very middle of a very big tour for you. Just finished, I believe, the U.S. tour and are just about to embark on an international tour. I'm picturing a giant jet with the Wimpy Kid logo on it and vans full of roadies. Like, what does a tour entail for you?
Well, I drive a Sprinter, so I think we have to take it down a few notches. But I drive like an oversized, customized Sprinter that's wrapped in the Wimpy Kid, book scheme, color scheme, and everything. And then I'm flying over commercial to to China, Japan,
Wow.
South Korea, and Taiwan on my next leg. Yeah, so the van was the part that's wrapped. The plane is not.
What have you seen from audiences on this most recent tour here in the U.S.?
It's really cool. We played in theaters where it was about 1,000 people a night, and I always started off with I started off every show with the same thought, which is that I can't believe after 17 years of doing this that my books are finding a new audience, that this was not the generation that I wrote for originally. Those guys are 25 years old now, Jason Tatum's age, basically. And so this is a new crew, and so it's really cool for me to see the full breadth of the readership. Like a few years ago, or actually last year, we unveiled a statue of Greg Heffley at my alma mater, the University of Maryland. And for the first time ever, I saw the whole span of readers in one place, from 8 years old to about 25, 26 years old. And it's cool to see, the people who your work has impacted. It's a tremendous honor.
I was just going to ask you, because you said China is one of the countries. I was just curious because I imagine that like there's certain countries where there's a little more freedom to speak and it's kind of to go off the cuff. And I imagine some countries you may be under some more restrictions. I was just wondering, were you given any kind of like sort of instructions with China and sort of limitations?
That's really interesting that you'd ask that. I haven't been given any limitations. I do sort of have a general sense that I probably should stick with the comics. But everywhere I go, there's like a person in military garb that's attending as well. So I'm sure there's a little extra there. But I think that honestly, what touring all over the world has taught me is that human beings, we all have this thing in common, our childhoods. We have parents and bullies and teachers and pets and homework assignments and pop quizzes and all these things that make up the fabric of the Wimpy Kid universe. And for all the differences that people have across the world, kids are more or less the same. It'd be really hard for me to know where I was if I couldn't see the kids, if I could just kind of feel the reaction of the kids, whether it be Brazil or New Zealand or wherever I am. It feels like kids are sort of sort of experiencing the books in the same way, and it gives me a little bit of hope.
Very, very good answer. I like that. The sort of brings the larger world into, you know, the small village. You said as part of you just talked about the whole Jason Tatum reference, and for those of our listeners not from Boston, that would be Jason Tatum of the world champion Boston Celtics, right? We just have to. So you're on the 16th book now, other than the spinoff. So Greg is got to be like 40 at this point. How do you keep things fresh? How do you develop stories to keep the ball rolling?
That's a good question. Believe it or not, it's the 19th book, and I'm coming up on the 20th, and I feel as energized about the 20th book as I do about anything. Usually, there's some aspect of childhood that I haven't explored yet. This last book is called Hot Mess, and it's about the extended family vacation where you're mixing with your cousins and aunts and uncles in a too small place. I think a lot of kids kind of know what that feeling is like. And my next book is going to be really centered around birthdays. And every kid has a birthday, right? Every kid knows what it's like to have a birthday. So I keep finding these pockets that I can fully explore. And so, so I, maybe one day I'll run out of pockets or topics, but so far I haven't, and that makes me feel like I could do this for a while.
And Greg is basically the same age, right, as when
Yeah.
they started. We
He
haven't seen
is.
him, like there's no chance of Greg going to high school and
No, and
or college
we're
anytime.
yeah, and that's the language of cartoons, and I think I really came to fully understand it during COVID, which is that the promise of a cartoon character is that they won't change. When we think of Calvin and Hobbes or Peanuts or any number of other cartoon long lasting comics, they're a security blanket in a way. It's like baseball. That is as radical as the changes we can go through are, that this one thing will stay the same. And I'm thinking that especially in our time of real political tumult, in which half of the country is profoundly unhappy right now, it at least there's this. Maybe this is something I can add to the world. Is this feeling of constancy and a feeling of unchange? So that's what I think cartoon characters do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Dave calls that the what do you call that, Dave? The comics reset.
Oh, the comics reset. Yeah. I don't know. I coined that term one day. Pete stuck with it.
I like it. I like it.
So if we could just go back to when you first came up with this idea, which essentially wound up creating, an entire new subgenre of publishing and made people who've been trying to get kids to read very excited, for the first time in a while. It started online before it became a book series. Was the idea gestating for a long time, or did it sort of come to you fully formed? It'll be a diary with the kids' illustrations. How did that come about?
Well, I think it's very funny that the podcast here is called Strip Search. Being a cartoonist and having a comic strip was my aspiration, and I failed to achieve it. Play me the world's smallest violin, but that was what I wanted to do. When I grew up, I read the Washington Post. Every day there was a few comics that I liked to read, and I could see for sure that that's where I wanted to be. And I thought I had the comedic chops to do it. I felt like my joke writing was strong, but I knew that I was not a fine artist. If you look at Schultz and Watterson and many others, they're also fine artists, like Burke Breathitt and Gary Trudeau. Now, I don't think Gary Larson really was a fine artist, right? But his art style really worked for his humor style. So I'll cut to the chase. I wanted to be a newspaper cartoonist. It didn't work out for me. I tried for about 3 years. Then I had this idea of embedding my comics into a journal format. I worked on it for 8 years. I really took my time. I wrote ideas for 4 years, and I wrote the first draft of the manuscript for 4 more years. And then I was finally ready to show it to someone. So it took me a really long time to develop it. I knew it was going to be my opus, win or lose, that this was going to be the best that I could do. And I feel really lucky that it worked out.
So now, going back to your early years, we know you started out in Maryland. You went to the University of Maryland. At some point in the 90s, you ended up in Massachusetts. You came to the Newburyport Daily News. How did you end up in our fine state?
First marriage is my short answer. I was married for a short time, I think 3 years total. I'm happily in my second marriage right now of 24 years and counting. So I came up there. My first job was at a little paper in Newburyport called the Newburyport Daily News. I got to be a graphic designer, and I stuck around, and I found a home here. I feel like New England was really where I belonged. I never really exactly felt like I belonged where I grew up, but here I've felt that sense of home that I didn't really feel back home.
That's as a native New Yorker who's been in the greater Boston area for a long time. how many decades. I could completely relate to that. I'm actually,
Yeah.
I'm not far from Newburyport. I'm
Oh,
in
cool.
Georgetown. My son's first job was at the Market Basket in Rowley. We all know Rowley,
And
where you
that
got,
character name comes from that. Yeah.
yep.
Here's something funny. I'll tell you a quick thing is that when I was at the Newburyport Daily News, I think Georgetown, they didn't have a lot of plumbing, right? That a lot of people weren't tied into the plumbing system. There's
Yeah,
a lot,
that sounds right. Yeah.
yeah. And
That sounds like
so
Georgetown.
yeah. And so I had to write, there was literally something called a first flush where, you know, there was some sort of initiation of the plumbing system. And on the same day, there was a meatball recipe. And so I literally, as the designer, accidentally put a picture of a meatball next to first flush. And I was ridiculed for that like forever.
Oh
Deservedly so.
man. I know some people at the Daily News. I got to get them to track that down for me.
Yeah.
So
1990.
now, so now you're in Plainville, where
Yeah.
your bookstore is, where you are at this moment. Can you just talk a little bit about sort of the programs you have? There's far from just a bookstore, and why it's been important to you and your wife to sort of give back to the Plainville community, which is such a huge part of what you're doing down there.
Yeah, it kind of started with we had this kind of dead downtown. There are just a few businesses in the downtown, a lot of kind of empty or hollowed out kind of um, buildings. And we there was an abandoned building called Falk's Market, which had been closed for 17 years by the time we bought it. But it used to be the hub of the community, this market. And it was by the time we got there, it's kind of a sad reminder of the glory days of the downtown. And so my initial goal was just to buy it and turn it into a nice building because I thought that it would go a long way towards the town's self-esteem to have a nice building with the word Plainville written on the side of it. After that, we were like, well, what should we put inside of the building? And we decided that a bookstore was a good idea because it could serve everyone from ages 2 to ages 98. And and it has, it really has. And we've brought in really the best authors in the world here over the last 9 years. And it's cool. You've got luminaries like Chelsea Clinton or Henry Winkler or Rick Riordan, Dave Pilkey, all these people coming to Plainville, Massachusetts, and that's just because we made a building. So it's cool.
That's awesome.
And you also have events, right? You have like sort of the game show style events where you bring in kids to do that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we do just about everything here. We have trivia on Friday nights occasionally, and then we do all sorts of things like yoga and arts and crafts kinds of things. We sometimes we bring in a giant inflatable humpback whale that kids can crawl inside of. It turns out there are a lot of things that you can do with a building, and I remember years ago when I was a Celtics fan, a budding Celtics fan, and Shaquille O'Neal came to the Celtics. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm gonna get to meet Shaquille O'Neal. And then I was like, well, why would I get to meet Shaquille O'Neal? Like what? I'm just like a guy, a fan or whatever. And what's funny is having a building changes everything because like for example, a few weeks ago we had Jason Tatum, and that was it's only because we built a building. Everybody needs a place to be, so it's like a magnet for people like that.
So you are currently a Celtics fan as well. Were you a Bullets fan, or I guess it would be the Wizards back in the day? It was the Bullets, but
I
did you give up the?
Right. I never really. I think there was a moment when the Bullets were popular, and I think I can't remember if they won it all. They might have come close. If they had Wes Unseld, maybe that's when they were good. But yeah, I became a Celtics fan when I moved up here because I decided to be one. Like I was like, I'm gonna fully integrate myself into the community, read all the books about the Celtics and the Red Sox, and the Patriots weren't a thing at the time. But I just wanted to feel like a part of the community. And so I did my research.
Well, as a native New Englander, welcome to the club, and glad to,
Thank you.
have you so let's go back to a little bit about the cartoon talk. And I know you talked about the wanting to be in the newspaper comics. So just sort of going back to your college days, and I believe you did a strip in college, but let's talk about sort of the comic stripping. What did you like about a newspaper comic strip? And you mentioned some of the artists who are fine artists, but sort of a related or a question like that. Who are some of your cartoon strip people that you always read and looked to? It doesn't necessarily have to be fine artists, but just the strips that were the ones that you glammed onto.
Yeah, I would say anything that had clean lines was something when I saw a lot of white space and clean lines. So my eyes always went right to Beetle Bailey and comics like that. Peanuts was always at the top of the page, and that was the fabric of all of our growing up years. Of course, made especially strong because of the specials. So that was like sort of part and parcel with that package. And then I did like Calvin and Hobbes. I think the Far Side one might have been one of my very favorites. And I really liked Bloom County for a while there too. And then Big Nate came along when I was about 19 years old. And I wrote to the creator, whose name is Lincoln Purse. And I said, hey, I want to become a cartoonist. Here are my cartoons. What can you tell me? How can I get better? And he gave me really good advice. And in fact, our friendship has persisted through all these years. And eventually I helped get his cartoons into books. So I was trying to get into the field that he was in, which didn't work out. And then eventually he wanted to get into the field that I was in, which did work out for him. So I guess he won twice.
That's awesome. We tell you a very abbreviated story. When Dave and I we met at Tufts in the late 80s, and we were working on putting a strip together there. And someone said, well, you know who is here at Tufts? The Reverend Scotty McLennan was good friends with Gary Trudeau, and was based the character
Roommates. He was his college roommate.
Yeah, and the character in the strip was based on him. So we went to go talk to him, and we said, we have this strip. He's like, oh, let me get Gary on the phone. Boop, boop, boop. He's like, he just holds it out. Dave and I just panicked.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I still don't. We have to this day, we have no idea what we said, but it didn't really help. But it was a good idea.
I had a moment at home, when I was growing up, I wrote to a few cartoonists, and one of them was Bud Grace. And then he called my house, but this was when they just introduced call waiting. And so my mom was on a call, and then she, took the call, and then it was Bud Grace. And then when she got off the phone, she goes, oh, your friend Bud called. I was like, Bud? Who's Bud? And she was like, Bud Grace. And for the first time ever in my house, I was like, I just swore at this missed opportunity to talk to Bud Grace. But I thought, it's wild when you get to meet the people who you look up to, because just for them to be real people. I read the Karl Barks comics all my life, and I loved them, and I sort of imagined what it would be like to go on an epic road trip and then go meet Karl Barks. And I never did. And I didn't realize that he really lived a long time in my life, during my lifetime. And I would have had a lot of opportunities to meet him. And I regret that I never did, because he's my ultimate Karl Barks.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I remember those when I was a kid.
Yeah.
He was drawing them, straight through. I want to talk a little bit about the movies.
Yeah.
So the first, they were a staple in my house. I think when the first one came out, my son was 9. He'd read the books, of course, and I can't tell you how many times we watched particularly those first two movies. Were basically on repeat, and of course there've been a bunch more since. And there was an animated one in 2021. Now there's a musical. I'm just curious, what your input on those projects are like. To what extent are you involved with the planning and the production? How does that work?
Yeah, it's been complicated and ever changing. I would say that where I am right now is that I'm working on the Disney Plus movies, and those are animated, and I am involved in every pixel of those things. Like I'm the writer, I'm the producer. Like we have meetings, several times a week. I'm in all the casting. Like whenever we're recording a cast member, I'm in it. I'm giving the cast members lines, blah blah blah. So as fully as fully involved as a creator can be, that's how involved I am in those movies. In the live action movies, I was a baby writer. I had only just put out my second book when the movie deal came through, and I did not know anything about screenwriting or movies or anything like that. So I didn't have an opportunity to write those scripts. Eventually, over time, I got myself in a position where I took a crack at it, but I was learning the movie business at that time. That being said, I was, there on set almost every day, or at least half the time. And I was, sort of like kind of very peripherally involved. And every so often they'd need a line, or they'd need me to write lyrics to a song or something like that. Exploded Diaper is my, I'm credited as a writer on that one. But it was, but in a way, like if you're a creator, what typically happens is that it's like selling a pencil, right? It's like you're saying, I have this idea, I have this thing. Now you guys make it into a movie because you guys know how to do movies. And there's not really a role for the creator. And I was lucky, that they wanted me around, or they had tolerated me being around. But if they're usually, it's kind of like it's a touchy business, right? Movies, because like a creator can cause a lot of problems for the film if the creator doesn't like the film, right? And so sometimes it's better for the studio to keep an arm's length distance. And not to go off the deep end on this, but while we're on the subject, this is why I tell people who are interested in making movies. I'm like, you could have a book that where you sold 50 million copies. The heroine in the book is a redheaded woman, the only redheaded person in the book. She's called blah blah blah, the red one, right? And people cosplay the red one and blah blah blah. When that movie studio buys it in the feature world, they might say on day one, movies with redheads don't do well. The heroine is going to have blonde hair, right? And you'll say, but wait, but the red one and the cosplay and blah, blah, blah. And honestly, in a way, it's like they bought it. You know what I'm saying? And they're right. Maybe they're right about those demographics. Like, for example, any movie that had Mars in it failed up until a certain point, until Red Planet, whatever the Matt Damon one was.
Yeah, yeah.
But the movie studios could definitely said, you cannot put the word Mars in the title, or people won't go. And so they're right, because of their experiences. But you can also be sort of like waving your flag and shaking your fist and saying, no, you don't understand. This is what made it special. And so that's kind of the tough side of movies for a creator. It's changed with streaming, because now they really want the creators to be involved, because they want to capture that thing, the thing that made it work on the page. They want to capture it on the screen. And so writers are in a much better position. Authors are in a much better position in this world. Sorry for the fire engine going by. Ambulance.
So now I'm going to sort of redirect our conversation to what is really my favorite question. I always like to ask our guests, being a cartoonist, what their tools of the trade are, and if you started out analog and went digital, if you stayed, analog, or what your thoughts are on one versus the other. So tell us, let's take you to the drawing board, and what do you like, and what have you experienced?
Yeah, I started off with pencil and paper, pen and ink when I first started posting online. And I'm not skilled with the pen. I can't make it do what I see in my head. So eventually, what I would do is I would ink and scan, and then in Photoshop I'd clean things up. But it was like because you can zoom in so much, you can keep improving, and I got almost like a psychosomatic illness where I couldn't like let it go. And so luckily, right about the time when I wanted to release Diary of a Wimpy Kid, in print, they developed this new thing. It was almost like a Surface Pro, and it was the first version of that, which allowed me to draw in vector. And I used a program called Flash, which is an animation tool. It's not really an illustration tool. And I use that. I still use it to this day. It's called Animate now. I have a Wacom right in front of me right now. That's pretty big screen, maybe 24 inches. I use a stylus, of course, and I still draw in Animate.
I have switched to electronic or digital drawing as well, and I made the switch, and I the amount of tools that is in one
Yeah.
square meter is unbelievable. An entire art studio just at your fingertips, and so I'm a big fan of the digital world. The one thing that the original cartoon, I like to collect original cartoon art. That's the one thing I sort of go back and
Yeah,
forth. Is it an original? You can't have that initial one that you
right.
frame on the wall. But
No, you can't. In my case in particular, it's like my drawings are vector, which is unusual. Like most cartoonists, like say Dave Pilkey, who does Dogman, Captain Underpants, he is digital now, but the stuff looks hand drawn, right? Because he's using almost like a rasterized ink kind of stroke. But my stuff is all vector, and where that comes in handy is, let's say I need to blow up something to the size of a bus or a building. It's going to look clean, like it's going to look correct. It's not going to have ink bleed lines and things like that. And that's really appealing to me. And going back to one of your first questions about which cartoons grab me, those ones like Mort Walker, that those looked like they were drawn in vector form, which they weren't.
Does that satisfy your curiosity, Dave? I know you like to get into the
I
weeds.
yeah, no, I could go on and on about get down there, but we're going to move on and let Pete ask the next question outside of the art tools.
Well, believe it or not, we have already approached the end of our time here. It's went by in a flash. This was a great conversation. But Jeff, we just sort of want to know, what else do people need to know about Wimpy Kid World? Right now, what do they have to look forward to? Sort of just what is on the horizon?
Yeah, there's a musical floating around out there right now. It's probably being performed in like 40 different places right now. That's really good, and it's really honestly better than my books. It's I think the best thing in the Wimpy Kid world, and it's really cool to me that there are these kids all over the country performing this thing right now, and they've really captured the essence of the characters. So that's and the songs are really great. So that's really appealing to me. We're working on more Disney Plus movies, hopefully multiple. And then I'm working on my 20th Wimpy Kid book, and even another spinoff is coming up too. So just the Wimpy Kid world will go on, and no matter how much our country changes or the world changes, I hope to be doing this for a while. Yeah, you're all caught up.
Excellent. Well, everybody, we will be including links to, not that you will have any trouble finding Jeff Kinney or Diary of a Wimpy Kid if you are so inclined, but regardless, when you go to our website, petpeevescomic.com/podcast, you will see this interview along with links to all of Jeff's most recent work, his various websites, his movies, you name it, it'll be there. Jeff, thank you so much again for coming on today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for the work that you do to help people get to know the cartoonists who they love. Thank you.
Oh, well, it's certainly our pleasure. And everybody else, we will be seeing you as we approach another new year of Strip Search, the comic strip podcast. Take care, everybody.